Chapter 78. Mr. Blue was noticing something besides the vaguely human, mannequin forms of the Autons sweeping into Sycamore Downs. He was distracted by the unholy screeching and wailing of the temporal rift alarm. Still clutching his head in agony, D3 and Sully were speaking to him, trying to find out the issue, but he couldn't hear. Then it suddenly stopped. All the horrific klaxon alarm noise died as the noise from the fair also stopped. The Time Lord in the cobalt suit shook his head, stumbling forward. Sully reached forward to steady him, but Mr. Blue shoved his hands away and slowly straightened himself and his azure tie. D3 watched in disbelief as the crowd of alien plastic monsters slowly made their way through Sycamore Downs, past the harbor and the carnival, heading towards... "Hey, they're heading to Monroe's Tavern!" she shouted. The old Time Lord nodded, noting the fact that most of the crowd of frenzied and terrified customers were pouring out of the bar.
"The Autons aren't going after the civilians,"
Sully said.
"They're trying to get inside Monroe's."
Mr. Blue watched as the townsfolk were, for the most part, being let to escape. The Nestine warriors of plastic were focusing on getting inside Nicholas's establishment. The elderly Time Lord started to trudge his way back to the bar, lamenting the fact that he didn't bring his exclamation point walking cane. Nicholas began the same cycle again, frantically trying to barricade his building. He had gotten the pattern down to almost a science. Through trial and error of this oft-repeated, god-awful, horrifying version of Groundhog's Day, he knew he could stave off the full frontal attack just long enough to escape to the basement. While there, he would, once again, fire up the temporal rift manipulator, slamming the last metal plate over the main entry door. He was just able to secure it before he heard the glass breaking. Wait, no. This was happening too fast. The Autons were never this direct and frenzied and focused before. He didn't have a chance to board up all of the windows. Huge bay windows on the other side of the room exploded, spewing glass. Nicholas looked at his watch. The Auton attack was happening nearly twice as fast as it ever had. He had to get to the basement. He had to get to the basement. He had to get to the... They were already inside. Damn it. Nicholas fired off several rounds, bullets impacting and shredding the hard plastic of the Nestine drone army men. They were coming quickly. He had to think fast. He pulled the pins off of 2 grenades, holding them to his chest as he cleared debris off the emergency manhole cover that led via chute straight down to the time fissure machine in the cellar. Nicholas had installed this last-ditch security measure for, well, this very moment, it seemed. Biding time for a split second, he let the monstrous plastic demons get close enough to... Nicholas smiled, dropped, and promptly disappeared, slamming the heavy steel opening over his head behind him. The room, full of plastic men, looked down quizzically at 2. Outside of Monroe's Tavern, the explosion was so intense it rocked the very ground around it, knocking Mr. Blue, D3, and Sully to the dirt. They, who had only at that moment arrived to aid Nicholas. Hundreds of rubber arms, legs, and various vaguely human heads flew everywhere outside, landing around the time travelers in different stages of char, melt, and burn. The smell was horrendous. D3 stood immediately, wiping dirt from her rear. Mr. Blue and Sully followed suit, standing, then trying to make sense of the explosion. Sully looked back at the old Time Lord.
"Do you think our ball man was caught in that?"
"No." Mr. Blue shook his head, sniffed the air.
"Nicholas lives still. He was trying to give himself a bit more time."
D3 half grinned. "Coming from a self-proclaimed Time Lord superhero? That's pretty damn funny."
"No."
Mr. Blue shook his head once more.
"No, Don, it's really not."
"Oh, come on." D3 looked over to Sully. "What do you think, Admiral?"
"Commodore."
Sully absently answered, staring behind her at the village of Sycamore Downs. "We gotta all chuckle in these difficult situations, right? I mean, they're all gone. All the badass plastic dudes, right? Blown up, right, Sully?" D3 felt the back of her neck prickle in chills as she followed the gaze of Sully and the Time Lord. She saw that Sycamore Downs was once again flooded with more Autons. They had appeared again in the small fishing village, in the exact same spot they had appeared before, in the exact same number.
Are you shitting me?
She shouted.
Are they coming in droves like soldiers? Is that another wave?
There was a bizarre sound then, like an explosion, yet in reverse, a very audible implosion. When D3 followed the strange noise, turning back toward Mr. Blue and Sully, her chills became sheer terror as she saw Monroe's Tavern completely rebuilt as it was several minutes earlier, complete with Nicholas inside, hastily attempting to fortify his doomed establishment.
It's not another wave.
Mr. Blue sighed very heavily.
The same wave.
Don't tell me you're trapped, like that little thief, Red Jones,
Sully demanded. The old man in the cobalt suit answered.
Something has gone wrong. We are, in fact, trapped in the temporal rift.